is something that all of us are on the road toward. None of us have achieved this, arrived there. Now, what I've done is taken all of Proverbs, everything in Proverbs, and tried to categorize in the subject of tongue what Solomon is trying to teach us, what God is trying to share with us. And the first category, of course, is lying, not telling the truth. But I've picked this verse out, chapter 12, verse 22. Look at it. It says, "The Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in men who are truthful." Why does God hate lying? Who's the father of lies? Satan. Who cannot tell a lie? God. You see, the very nature of God is that he tells the truth. He tells the truth all the time. He never says anything but that. Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth." If you can't trust God, then there's a real issue of character in question here. And so to God, it is who he is. It's what he's made of. And so if I tell a lie, I can never do anything farther away from his character. Do you get that? Because to tell the truth, I am, even if whether I'm a Christian or not, whether I follow Jesus or not, if I tell the truth, especially if it's a difficult road to take, I am aligning myself with the very nature of God. Okay? God says, I hate, in fact, the Proverbs 6 passage, just that's noted there, I didn't quote it for you, it says, 6 things the Lord detests, 7 things I hate. There's the list of 7 things God absolutely hates. 3 of the 7 have to do with the tongue. He hates arrogance, number 1. Lying lips, number 2. And about number 4, he says, I hate that person who bears false witness against a brother. That is, who's lying, he's a false witness. And then the last one, he says, the one who causes dissension among brothers. The one who's always working in there negatively, trying to bring bad out of unity. And so there's a lot of Proverbs on this subject of lying. Just a couple of principles here. Number 1 is you can't separate character and lying. You can't be lying and say you're a good person. All right? Lying or telling the truth, whichever it is, and your character go hand in hand. If you are telling a lie, do not call yourself a good person. All right? God hates lies. It's absolutely diametrically opposed to who he is. And if you can't trust someone, what they say, can you trust that person? Okay, so they go hand in hand. If you're married to someone and you're telling that person a lie, how deep can that relationship be? If you have a child who's lying to you as a parent, how much can you trust them? You see, the character and telling the truth go hand in hand. Always, always, always. And which is good for us to remember, I must and always should tell the truth. You know the Bible, there's no such thing as a white lie. There's no such thing as a white lie any more than there's a white witch. Okay? A witch is someone who's listening to and trying to tune in to the evil spirit world. There is no white witch. You're either into the occult or you're not. And there is no white lie. You're either telling the truth or you're not. Now, Paul says in Ephesians that we should tell the truth, speak the truth, what? In love. So love, God is love as well. And so he brings these two in his own character, his character of love, his character of telling the truth. Somehow, he brings these two together, and that is our challenge. To always, always, always tell the truth, never lie. Always do it in love. Always do it in a helpful, healing way. We'll talk about that in a minute. So lying is big to God. Number 2, if I'm doctoring my communication, I'm lying. When the policeman stops you and says, how fast were you going? What are you going to tell him? Well, I don't know. You're not going to tell him you just looked at the speedometer and you're 15 miles over, right? White lie. Is that truth or no? It's funny because just after the last service, we have a sheriff and a motorcycle cop, and he says, you know, I shouldn't tell you this. He says, you know, if someone tells me the truth, he says, I mark that down. That's all I'm going to say. Okay? He makes a mental note of the guy or the woman who he asks, and they tell him the truth, whatever it is. See, whether he's aware of this or not, because he's connecting character with lying. So, gossip. Another big one in Proverbs, gossip. That is, you know, the Hebrew word for gossip literally has the idea of whispering. Whispering. When you whisper, did you hear about Joe? Now, it doesn't have to be a whisper. It's still gossip, but that's the idea in Hebrew. It says, a man who lacks judgment derides his neighbor, but a man of understanding holds his tongue. A gossip betrays a confidence, but a trustworthy man keeps a secret. Gossip is so tasty, how we love to swallow it. You know, the Bible is clear that gossip is a sin. In fact, some of you are familiar with this chapter in the Bible. It's called Romans chapter 1. In Romans chapter 1, about halfway through, it says that some people bury or push down and suppress the truth that is clearly evident about God. And having done that, having flipped that toggle switch, they begin an escalator ride down. And it gives a list of sins as they go from descend into evil. And 3 times it says God gave them over. God gave them over to their own choice in the matter. And toward the bottom of that escalator ride is same-sex union. That is homosexuality or lesbianism. I believe it's a sin, the practice of it. And that's not a big surprise or shock to you. Most evangelicals would agree with that statement. Now, before you go all off and disconnect from the rest of the day, let me just say, you know what's below that? You know what the next step down is? Gossip. Why is it then that in the church we all freak out about homosexuality, but we gossip in the lobby or in between every Bible verse in a small group? Ouch. It's hard to go through a week without being a party to gossip. You know, I live in pretty much a bubble here. You know, I meet with tremendous people on staff. I meet with godly people on the board. I meet, and people meet with me. They know I'm a preacher, so, I mean, they watch what they say. I'm still exposed and a party to gossip. We all stumble in many ways, and it's hard for me to even imagine what you must have to survive, what you have to go through at work or at school. I watched a movie a couple of weeks ago. It's one of those stupid movies you go, why did I waste so much time? It was about teenagers. But anyway, I remember this one scene, and this kid, something came out, or he said something in class. I don't remember all the details. But anyway, this is the middle of school, middle of a class. And he finished his sentence or embarrassing situation, and everybody, it was kind of a spoof, every one other kid got on their phone and started texting all their friends. And before the bell rang from class, and a little bit funny, the whole world knew about this guy's mistake. And that's kind of, you know the 4th largest nation in the world? Facebook. How much of Facebook is just plain gossip? Well, if you're on it much, you know the answer. Okay, so gossip is a sin. It's not up there with the no big deal. God says this is a serious deal. Why? Because you're causing dissension. He who derides his brother is a fool, is making a big mistake. So if you're wondering if it's gossip, it probably is. Now what do? Let's say tomorrow at work, around the water cooler, around the coffee pot, they start talking about Joe or somebody. And suddenly a little flag, the Spirit of God just raises a flag and says, Bruce, you know, this is exactly what I'm talking about.